there are lots of pets who stay relaxed most of the time, or even some of the time, and then things happen. You know, people come to the door, or goodness gracious, gentlemen, or they get left home alone, or storms roll in, and then you get the pacing and the panting and the barking, and boy, then anxiety happens. Well, we've got new research, and it shows that heart rate variability, that's changes in heart rate, which are normal, we can increase that. In fact, we can have their heart show us that their stress is diminished, and we can help them reduce their stress. And I'm going to show you how to do that. And in case we haven't met, by the way, I'm veterinarian Dr. Jeff Nickel. I'm residency trained in veterinary behavior medicine with many years of experience in general practice. There isn't a whole lot that I haven't seen in my years in this work. And so I want to show you this research project, but first let me tell you that if you tell me that you're here and where you're from, I'd appreciate that very much. And if what I'm telling you is helpful, please hit the heart button. And if you can hear me loud and clear, please hit the wow button just to make sure that if we have technical issues, we know about that. So let me show you something. This is a journal that's essential to specialists in veterinary behavior medicine. And it's called the Journal of Veterinary Behavior. Comes out monthly, and it's all about research. We have textbooks to give us the do this, don't do that. Oops, I'm sorry. Well, there's one of those technical difficulties. Let me get this. Oh, shucks. There we go. Sorry about that, everybody. There. Okay. Anyway, oops, almost sat on your head, Miss America. Sorry about that, girlfriend. So, anyway, gentlemen, I use that term loosely with these fellows. This paper is called The Potential Beneficial Effect of Classical Music on Heart Rate Variability in Dogs Using Veterinary Training. I'm only going to read a few sentences from the abstract just so that you're clear on the drift of this thing. Heart rate variability is the variability between subsequent heartbeats. In other words, when we're doing most things that require exertion, for example, or if there's stress that results in high levels of adrenaline, then we tend to have a very steady heart rate because it's driven by the sympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system, you know, the fight or flight part, the adrenaline. But on the other hand, when anybody, including people and dogs and cats, are relaxed, then we tend to have a normal fluctuation in the rate of our heartbeat. It might be lub-dub, 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 lub-dub. And we get that variability, and that's essential to relaxation. It occurs when we're relaxed, including our dogs. So, influenced by psychophysiological factors, neurohormonal mechanisms, and cardiac disease can be a factor. Auditory stimulation, stuff that the dog hears, specifically classical music, has been documented to benefit the well-being in a number of animal species, and that includes us, by the way. The aim of this study was to determine whether exposure to classical music improved heart rate variability. In other words, caused the heart to vary in its rhythm, which would mean that we had reduced stress in dogs during training for veterinary education. In other words, these are veterinary students, and in this case, they were being taught to do physical exams. Nothing painful, nothing that most of us would consider particularly stressful, but you know, who likes going to the doctor, right? So, what they found were significant differences between dogs exposed to as compared to those who were not exposed to classical music. So, a good scientific paper always points out its own shortcomings and suggests areas where more research can be done to add further to the whole thing, because research is collaborative. Different genres and types of music and their effect on heart rate variability of dogs needs to be explored in the future. Well, I have a story for you on that. And this is a pet who I treated. It's one of the great cases because, well, it's kind of fun, and it started out not so fun. This is a dog named Caden, and I made some notes here, and I didn't want to overlook anything, so let me just indulge me here and let me read the part of this to you. Caden was a 3-year-old Sheltie, already in his 3rd home when I met him. His breeder had initially sold him to a young man after he'd been shown only once in the breed ring. Caden's new person took him to a dog park. perfectly legitimate. Oh, Cindy, thank you for coming. And if you don't mind, hit the heart button if you can hear me real well to make sure I haven't fouled this thing up. My thumbs are too big to push the little things on the smartphone screen here. So he'd been shown once in the breed ring. He was bred by a breeder. Oh, thank you very much. And the breeder had taken him to the Sheltie breed ring once, and that was kind of the end of his show career at that point. And so she sold him to this young man who took him to the dog park on one occasion. And while he was there, a garbage truck picked up a large commercial dumpster and accidentally dropped it. If you can imagine the kind of racket that caused. And Caden got so panicked that he raced and ran frantically around the dog park trying to escape it, just frankly losing his little Sheltie mind. Well, this young fellow didn't know what to do with the dog and didn't have competent help with the behavior problem. So he returned it to the breeder because of the fear that Caden had shown to the garbage trucks. Well, that was about the same time that a good lady named Julie decided that she wanted to adopt a Sheltie. So she contacted this breeder and had actually pretty much decided to adopt one of her puppies when she met Caden and fell in love with the little guy, which is what we do with pets, right, girlfriend? And so she took him home. Well, he continued to be panicked by the sound of garbage trucks, including the beep beep noise they make when they back up. He was also scared of diesel trucks and their air brakes. And this is important because this is a PTSD type of an issue where there was one major exposure that made a physiologic and physical neurologic change in the neuronal circuits in Caden's brain. And that's really what PTSD is about. The brain is a very physical organ and it can change actually permanently. So, Julie told me that other than big trucks, Caden, as she put it, was fearless. Well, it didn't turn out to be quite the case. He didn't like to play, and he did not appear to be food motivated for teaching him stuff. And that was a big problem for the dog trainers who'd already tried to help her and hadn't really got any place with him. So, no one had been able to figure it out. Well, so Caden and his people live in Santa Fe, about an hour's drive north of Albuquerque here, on a narrow dead-end road near the plaza. And so when the garbage trucks come along, they come down the road to empty all the people's garbage and stuff, and then they have to back up. And when they do, here comes this beep, beep, beep business, and drove poor Caden to distraction. I mean, he was just scared to death. It wasn't like he was lunging and barking aggressively at them. He was just trembling with fear. So then at one point, Julie's husband, Ken, nice man, was taking Caden for a leash walk, and he got surprised by the garbage trucks. And so when the garbage truck backed down the road, Caden panicked so much that he jerked hard, surprising Ken, and pulled the leash out of Ken's hand. And now we got this loose dog. And he ran home so frantically that he actually broke 2 nails on his way. And that's when their regular veterinarian, hearing this story, told Ken and Julie, look, needed to see a specialist, and I'm a guy here in New Mexico. So that's how I met Caden and Julie and Ken. So anyway, it turned out that, these folks had tried taking him to Lowe's, home improvement stores and all that stuff with them. But, these are warehouses and they have these forklifts and they're lifting these big pallets of stuff and they back up and you get this beep, beep, beep thing. And it drove poor Caden crazy. Well, that was a problem. And by the way, he also turned out to have a problem with storms, although he didn't tremble and hide like most dogs do. He ran outside and barked at the storm. So could have been worse. Anyway, Julie and Ken had already been doing the right thing in the sense that they were doing their best to avoid the fear triggers for poor Caden. Knowing when the garbage trucks were expected to show up, they made it a point to take Caden elsewhere, which avoidance matters. You think, well, that's kind of simplistic, isn't it? Certainly it is, but we know that with repetition and driving this fear response repeatedly tends to cause these neural circuits to be stronger and more thickly networked, and the memories in the long-term memory storage in the hippocampus get more deeply rooted and more ingrained. And so avoidance really matters because rehearsal of these ramp-ups is not our friend. They do get worse. So I explained that the smart bet, number one, was to reduce the intensity of the noise. And there's this wonderful product I'll show you. And this is Caden. And if you look carefully at this picture, he's wearing something that looks like earmuffs. You see that black thing on either side of his head? There's a little chin strap I don't think you can see. These are called mutt muffs, and everybody thinks that's pretty funny. Well, this is a very high quality product, and they fit great. They come in different sizes, and they significantly diminish the intensity of sound. So dogs who have noise phobias can make a very big difference. And it doesn't eliminate it completely, but of course I haven't worn mutt muffs, but these dogs feel much better. And that's our number one priority, obviously. We don't want them scared to death. But by diminishing significantly the intensity, the volume of the sound, we reduce these rapid ramp-ups in the neural circuits, and so we're improving the behavior. Well, so I also told them that when they needed to implement something to reduce this poor dog's fear reactions, that they could play something called Through a Dog's Ear. This is music you can get on their website. It's just throughdogsear.com. They also have Through a Cat's Ear. And you can download it onto your computer and play it on your speakers on your computer, or they'll send you a CD that you can play. But it is music that is scientifically developed to be in sync with the natural calming rhythms in the dog's brain. The alpha waves are potentiated, and dogs are calmer. And it's actually very pleasant music, and it is a lot like classical music. So hence we've got this research, which, by the way, we knew that before, but what we know now is how easily it can be measured. Because what they did in this study, by the way, is they used a heart rate monitor. The Polar brand, if you're familiar with it, people who are runners or bicyclists, and they're trying to keep their heart rate up for cardiovascular fitness. Well, they were able to fit these to dogs and very accurately not just measure their heart rate, but the variability in the heart rate. And again, when it becomes more variable, we know they're calmer. And in this study, they did find that those dogs, during their physical exams by the veterinary students, they were calmer. We knew that because of their heart rate variability. So we went ahead with Caden here, and Julie then got creative. And so she had her smartphone with her and was able to turn up the volume. And she said, well, classical music, that's pretty good. How about we try rock and roll, like 50s rock and roll? Well, it turned out to actually help Caden remain even calmer. So he's wearing his mutt muffs, and he can hear the 50s rock and roll, which isn't classical music. And hence, what they said here in this research study, they need to explore other genres and see if that impacts heart rate variability. Well, my point here is that it's clearly quite individual. And in fact, with further experimentation, it turned out that the 50s rock and roll that made the biggest difference by far and away for Caden was Elvis. Did the trick. So now Julie takes him for walks, he wears his mutt muffs, and she plays Elvis on her smartphone, and life is good. And in fact, this little dog has learned to accept that, and it has diminished in its intensity so much that he now has begun to play. And in fact, let me show you what he really does for fun. And this is something that Julie has really learned to enjoy with him. This little guy's become a serious agility competitor. And you just look at the face on that little guy and the way he's flying over that little jump. He loves this stuff. So his quality of life has improved tremendously, and so has Julie and Ken's, because their dog is happy and he's got a great sport that he enjoys. So life's pretty good. So music can make a difference. It's not the only thing that can help, by the way. Let me show you something else. This is called Tellington Touch, or T-Touch. It was developed by a lady named Linda Tellington. And what I'm showing you on this picture is just one of several moves. This is called the tarantula pulling the plow. Who knows why they give them these names. But when you have a dog who's nervous, and you can sit with that dog, Miss America, honey, can you sit up for me? Let me see if I can show people this. And so what they're doing here is they're just pinching the skin gently, and they're moving it back and forth. And there's another move where they take two fingers and rotate it in a circle on the side of the dog's chest. And these dogs predictably relax. There's a great handout I can send you, by the way. If you want to put your email address and a message to me on my Facebook page, then I will email you the instructions on doing Tellington Touch, also known as T-Touch. And it's something you can do with your dog or your cat while they're sitting with you. And, as the pet calms down, we calm down. Well, our dogs in particular, less so with our cats, but our dogs in particular, they watch us almost all the time for behavioral cues. It is something that is innate to their little brains because in the wild, their survival largely relies on their picking up important messages from their leader, like, okay, now's the time we're going to go foraging, now is when we're going to go hunting, now is when we've got some other dog group that's going to steal our carcass that we drug home today, or take away our breeding females or some other essential resource. And so they watch their leaders. Well, they watch us. Our dogs are doing that, and people, you hear folks say, oh, my dog senses my emotions. Actually, not really. Excuse me, Tony T. We frown on that. Thank you. They don't sense our emotions. They read us like a book. They're watching our body signals, and they're following them. So if when you're administering T-touch to your dog, here, sit back over here, girlfriend. You are pretty relaxed. And you're doing a T-touch maneuver on your dog's chest, and she sinks and relaxes. When we feed off each other, we know that physical contact, whether it's with another person or with a pet, releases the hormone oxytocin. It's one of those feel-good hormones. The touch is a really important part of it. And so as I relax my dog or my cat, then I benefit as well. And we get an increase in heart rate variability, which isn't the end in itself by any means. It is a scientific measure, which turns out to be a very accurate one. So life can be pretty good with that. I think an important point that I have to absolutely make is that we're talking here about applying scientific methods, but the underlying emotion coming from us is kindness and patience. And it's very easy when you have a dog who is barking like a fiend at people coming to the door, or is shuddering and climbing around on you because she's afraid of storms, which this little girl here occasionally has a pretty significant problem with, or is just wigging out because she's home alone. It's very easy to set our attention on the problem that we want to bring to an end. And everybody who's ever come to me with their pets, whether it's for vomiting, diarrhea, a fracture, cancer, heart disease, or now that I'm a trained specialist in behavior medicine with behavior disorders, everybody is focused on the problem, and I get that. I mean, if they didn't have a problem, they wouldn't show up, and they want that problem to end. And I certainly get that too. And so with focusing just on the problem, girlfriend, what are you, you pretty silly girl, by just focusing on the problem, we can get impatient, understandably, and we can lose our patience. And verbal reprimands do nothing but increase the intensity of the poor dog's anxiety in that context. Well, we sure don't want to be racing down that path. We want to abandon those things. We don't want the dog to focus on these anxiety triggers. We want the dog to focus on something else. In this case, these relaxation methods that we're using. And so you really want to focus on what we want this dog to do instead of the behavior we don't want. And what we're talking about tonight is we want this dog to focus on relaxing, which again, we share with them. And so something like Tellington Touch, or playing classical music, or in the case of Caden, what turned out to be Elvis, you should be creative. You want to do what it takes to relax that dog and abandon all that other stuff. And so you have to come to this with an attitude of patience and kindness, and just try to ignore the problem and show the dog what you want her or him to do instead. And the same is true with fuzzy white cats and cats of other colors too. So if anybody has any questions, Wendy from Atlanta, thank you for coming. I'm glad you're here. It's good that you speak English there. I know that sometimes I get people send me questions on my Facebook page from other countries, and fortunately they know English because I don't know any other languages at all. I sort of speak a little bit of dog and cat though. That's right. So thank you for tuning in. And any other questions come up, by all means. If you don't want to bring them up now, you can sure as heck send them to me on Facebook. And next week, by the way, we're doing our Facebook Live on Wednesday evening instead of the usual Thursday at 6 o'clock Mountain Time, which I think would make it 8 o'clock Eastern and 5 o'clock Pacific. And what we're going to talk about is something that will happen to many households the night following, because Thursday evening is Halloween, and a lot of dogs have a real problem with anybody who shows up at the door. Dogs who are not accustomed to children, who are not socialized with them when their little canine brains were between 5 and 12 weeks of age, when they actually could have assimilated that into their developing brain. That window closed, and people, they didn't understand what they needed to do and when. So we've got a problem, and it's a lifelong problem with dogs who don't understand those unpredictable movements of kids. And not only do we have kids at the door, but kids dressed up in weird outfits, intending to be scary in a lot of cases. And dogs can be reacting by barking and lunging. Needless to say, it could be dangerous for a child. Very often, you're trying to pass a Snickers bar out the door, and you're trying to fight your dog to keep him from leaving. You can put the dog in another room, which is maybe a very smart thing to do, because that's avoidance again. And you can play through a dog's ear. You can play classical music. You could keep your dog with you on a leash, but if those children coming to the door continue to spike your dog's arousal and reactions, you don't want that. So we'll talk about some very specific ways of handling that next week. I hope with enough time for you to put it to use the next day. And of course, one other thing that's important, especially, if you do have candy that has chocolate in it, or if you have children and they bring home chocolate, dogs who eat chocolate, that can be a very serious toxin. So be super careful of that. So next week, 6 o'clock Mountain Time on Wednesday night, we're going to talk in a broad sense about dogs who react to people who come to the door, very specifically about what's going to happen the following night. So thank you for coming. It's great seeing everybody. And by the way, if you can't attend these things, you can get them every Tuesday morning in your email box, along with my weekly media post, which also goes in the Albuquerque Journal the preceding Friday. It'll arrive in your email Tuesday morning. All you have to do is go to my website, drjeffnicol.com, drjeffnicol.com. There's no S on my name. And if you go to my website, you can subscribe. There's no charge, of course. And you'll get that stuff, these videos and my media blog on Tuesday mornings. And I will send you, at no charge also, my at-home pet first aid and CPR guide, which is worth printing out and keeping handy just in case. So thank you again. Have a great evening. I'm Dr. Jeff Nicol, along with Miss America and two cats who just disappeared to explore my office here at home.